and then open my agenda. Yeah. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the first kickoff of the Python Stewardship working group. So today we can go a little bit over what this is and what we want to take out of it, like what are the goals of this project and why it was necessary in the first place. I don't think we're going to do too many decisions today, or there's not too much to think about. So let's maybe we can go a little bit faster than the full hour. So, well, most of you know why this is taking place because the state of Python is quite a mess. Is an ad hoc culture that we developed from a bunch of people that didn't know Python and were doing their best. Um, it was fine. It got us where we are, which is consider everything is not a really bad place, but we can do better. So the goal of this is let's consolidate across all of the Python services. Let's consolidate our Python code base in the first place. Let's make it easier for newcomers to contribute to our Python, both internal contributors and external contributors. Make it easier to monitor and deploy these applications that we're building, and yeah, just make it. I don't know. I'm pretty sure we cannot get to the level of guidelines we have in Ruby, but we can go somewhere there. So the exit criteria is that I put 4 exit criteria, which is a little bit bold or ambitious for a working group. These are not small, and we might decide to drop one of them over time. But something that I highlighted over here is I think it would be best for each one of these exit criteria to have one DRI instead of having one DRI for everything, and then we can split ourselves between these DRIs or work together on each DRI, on each exit criteria. So the exit criteria are a non-Python developer has guidance on how to understand and contribute to the Python code base. So this is contribution guidelines and maintainership guidelines. Oh, this is on the third step. Yeah, I think this is a problem Tatiana is also bringing a lot often. It's really hard for a Ruby developer to pick up Python. Like, it's easy to understand. You jump in the code and you can understand, but when you go about writing, understanding where things are on the code base, it gets a little bit messy. There are some differences between philosophy on how Rails is developed and how Python is developed. So it can be a little bit of the same way that for me, when I joined and started working in Ruby, it was also difficult. This will come at a later time, I believe. I think we can put this as a second, but guidelines and templates for code-based creation. So when you're creating, it's a little bit different, the work that we do in Python than the work we do in Ruby. It's common that we create a new repository for all of the services, all of the libraries and everything. We set them on a repo. That means that each repo is following their own rules that's not really desirable. Also, each repo needs their own pool of maintainers, which is putting a little bit of a bottleneck on maintainership, and we need to solve this. The third one is maintainership guidelines, how to become a maintainer. Whether we are maintainers per project or maintainers across Python. So we can maybe think of having a shared pool of maintainers instead of having like AI gateway maintainers and dual workflow service maintainers. We have a single pool of maintainers that we pick up. It's kind of like a monorepo culture across different repos, right? Different repositories. So that's one of it is. And the final one, and the most complicated one, I believe, out of the three is guidelines for deployment. So there are three types of applications. It's written over here. Yeah. So Python, you first the starting for the second is the Python utilities, which is like a Line 5, something that you run on the command line or prompt library, or now the combined one, evaluation framework. There are libraries. We're seeing now a jump in code base shared as libraries. The Cloud Connector team is creating one. So how do you deploy those? Like, do we use PyPy? Do we use um, our registry? How do we go about that? And the third, and I think where most of the time will be spent, like this will take quite a bit of time, is how guidelines on deploying Python services. Because it's a pain right now. We need to deploy as especially on self-hosted. Like on .com, it's kind of a solved problem. We use Runway for deploying the services. We can write the guidelines on how to get this done. But for self-hosted, it's still a little bit of and we are having people from distribution also on this Python working group to tackle that last point. So what do you guys think about it? What's in your mind around it? Thoughts, ideas?
I think it's good exit criteria. I just want to also notice that we had kind of the same issues in the past with Go language in GitLab. And
Mm-hmm.
you can, if you go to the Go guidelines, you can basically see that this is exactly what they have. They have the pool of the Go reviewers, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure how there is like company guidelines, and also there are separate guidelines by the stages. For example, we use Go for Gitily and also for all the secure features. So secure stage, whatever it calls right now, have their own set of the guidelines for their specific applications.
Mm-hmm.
So I might
Yeah,
say
yeah.
that having Python reviewers who will be exactly capable in reviewing the code in AI gateway and Ceph might be not very realistic
Mm-hmm.
because of the kind of difference in this project. So it's not only
Mm-hmm.
Python, right? It's also the
Yeah.
fast API or like tests, which is a separate set of things that you need to know. But maybe if we have the guidelines, that'll be much easier.
Yeah. After me. In some ways, that's also a problem with Rails code base, right? Like we know about Ruby in general, but the domain specific knowledge, like if I have to review Sidekick jobs, uh, I have to, but it's not my expertise. I think you can, if we write better guidelines and we consolidate the frameworks with like the libraries, okay, let's always use Fast API. So then we know that Fast API is something we need to study and we need to get good at maintainership of Fast API.
Yeah,
So this kind of a thing could help, but that's the kind of decision the group that is working on those areas will need to.
yeah.
Uh,
And but like in Rails, we also have the different types of the reviewers. So you can be like you can review on the backend and like database.
yeah.
It's just like such a different like a set
Mm-hmm.
of knowledge. So this is the require different review. And same like for example, the code owners. So you like can't make changes to the pipeline configuration without approval from pipeline configuration
Mm-hmm.
team. So this is also what we can
Mm-hmm.
think about, like the subset of the reviewers. And also, I would say, I guess it's written in our maintainer guidelines for Rails. So we basically need to kind of the role of like at least how I see the role of maintainers to guide like gatekeep the code base from the codes that we don't want. Like we need to set at the first we need to understand what we actually don't want to have, like what will be
Mm-hmm.
the bad patterns. And maybe, of course, the maintainer can't know everything, but they should
Mm-hmm.
just kind of scan the most like bad parts.
I kind of I wanted to support what Tatiana just said, that probably we already have a very, like, we have three different types of the application, like the utilities, the libraries, the
Mm-hmm.
services. On top of that, like, I've dipped my toes into in the AI gateway, and I'm working with the dual workflow, and those works with with different protocol, like the communication protocol. So like the AI gateway works mainly on the HTTP, and the
Mm-hmm.
dual workflow works on the gRPC. They serve different architectures, like the AI gateways for direct communication from the clients, and some integration with the with the GitLab Redis instances, while Duo Workflow has this like intermediary executor that works on the client host machines that need to be spin up.
Mm-hmm.
So like there are a lot of differences in the state that is already. That I'm not saying that it's impossible to be aware of everything, but we also may need to understand like these different subdomains, like for example, this database expertise that um, will not put the burden on a single person that is maybe not willing to or not feeling confident enough. That
Mm-hmm.
okay, I feel confident with the fast API and Python, but then they got pulled into the workflow, and it's like, oh, now it's gRPC, and there's like this
Mm-hmm.
intermediary executor that is Go binary running the Docker container, and it's like, okay, what's going on? Um, so what I'm trying to get at is that probably this is gonna come up during the further conversation in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But this split, or maybe at least at the beginning, like when somebody gets like, okay, I'm comfortable with the fast API and the AI gateway. Now maybe I'm willing to take a jump, or take a step into the dual workflow to expand my knowledge and
Mm-hmm.
expertise towards like the other protocols and other types of architecture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. It's gonna be difficult, and it's not a solvable part of it is because since we didn't have guidelines in the first place, we went ad hoc. It's the classic, we're choosing the best libraries for the job, but there's no consistency across the the jobs, which it's the trade-off. We didn't have a trade-off, and well, yeah, we'll figure it out. So my question is, given these four exit criteria, does anybody already would like to be the DRI for one of them? Does anybody feel like they would like to be the DRI for one of them?
I think I can be the DRI for the first one because it's aligning actually with what I'm trying to do now. So it's my
No.
personal exit criteria also. So yeah.
Okay. Anyone
I'll
else
take
would
the
like to? It doesn't need to be
second
the same
item.
DRI across the whole time. We can switch off over time. But oh, sorry, Tam, you were saying something?
The second item, so the development guidelines and creations of new Python code base. It's like we have some kind of set tooling besides the code itself, like, linters and
Yeah.
other stuff, testing framework and so on and so forth. So it's something we can standardize, even come up with like cookie cutter, like the
Yeah.
template that we just run, and then we'll generate a bunch of boilerplates for us. But yeah, I'll try to look across all the one that we have right now and see which one are quite common and get some consensus on which one we want to choose. Um, so one example I can see is, for example, with the workflow projects, they use different linters. In fact, two of them at the same time, like MyPy and PyWrite, were other project using MyPy. So try to see the differences is quite, also the team motivations on why they want to pick one over the other. But at the end of the day, I think it's still guidelines. So it's still leave it up to the team to choose the tool they want to use. And so
Yeah. And So one of the difficult parts of outcome of this is that we're gonna have to change the existing services or code base to something that feels a backward move, right? So for example, the team has decided to use MyPy and PyWrite. If we standardize, will they remove or change? Like they made this decision. So I'm happy that we have members of almost every service and tool here, because then we can hear and we're not pushing this onto someone that is like not understanding what's going on. So I appreciate that we have from workflow service, from Ceph, from the new Python client that we're gonna create, we're gonna work on now. So all of these aspects, but that might be, and this might cause a bit of friction with the teams.
Yeah.
So I'm expecting a little bit. So, but it's gonna be like, it's like Go. You have the Go format, and everybody says that's nobody likes. It's the worst part of Go, but it's also the best part of Go. Because nobody likes the formatting, but everybody likes that there is a format, that there is a default formatting. So it's the same thing that's going to happen here. No, we're going to make a lot of decisions that are going to feel there's going to be some pushback. But we need to figure out how to work through that.
Mhm.
So do you want to be the DRI for this step, 10? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm working on this one, the deployment for each application type. So I'll put myself as a DRI for this one. Does anybody have particular love for this step, for the third?
Yeah, I actually interested in. I'm not sure is it like the best expert on guidelines for Python right now, but like my understanding is the DRI role doesn't require to write everything
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah, so you are responsible for making sure this works, that we have something in the end. Not really like your responsibility is to base yourself on the support of your peers, but make sure that things are moving forward, not really to do the thing in itself. Okay, so I'm surprised that we already have their eyes for each one of them. And these are the people that are just driving. Each one of us can still work on the others, depending. So what I suggest for this, each one of these DRIs, we have the epic. Oh, did I create a Python word? There is an epic somewhere. Epic. So my suggestion here is for each one of these DRIs to create an epic for the work, for a sub epic for the work. You are going to be the owner of this epic. You are the owner of communicating progress and communicating blocking steps and requesting help from others. So this is the goal. My expectation is that this working group will run for 3 months, for a quarter, and then we're gonna stop and see where we are, and then we're gonna decide whether we achieve the exit criteria or not, right? So, because this kind of work, it can go forever. We can always add something more on the guidelines. We can always add something more, like an improvement to the linter. But we need to have that kind of issues, Ray. Like we need to have follow-ups, because the follow-ups are also good for newcomers that want to contribute eventually. So we don't need to solve everything, right? Okay. So any other thoughts on this? Is this a good idea or? Okay. Cool. Okay. So the other decision that we need to make is syncs. Like this is the kickoff, and we have folks across all of the time zones, so syncing can be complicated every now and then. One of the ideas is that we don't have syncs, we have less syncs with the whole group and more syncs per exit criteria. So if we are working on a specific one, we can have syncs. I don't know if that's a good idea, if people are going to be more tied to a specific sync, or if people are going to be tied to like going to be flowing through different. What do you think?
I would suggest you just have one goal and just discuss everything, because otherwise, if you want to, for example, participate into the like just kind of hear what people decided for a different topic, you need to attend that other meeting as well.
Yeah.
Potentially, and I'm not sure like how many discussion would we have to like
Yeah, opposite effect. Since people that want to know what's going on. Hello, doggy. Join multiple calls. It makes sense.
Yeah, I also agree with Tatiana on this. I think that the subjects are very interweaved with each other. Like some of the guidelines, like some of the decisions made about the linters and the libraries that we decide like this is the standard will impact the what we need to prepare for the non-Python developers coming into. So like whether really more heavy on like the PyTest or unit test, or like is it a fast API or a Flask or whatever. This would need to be accounted into the in the developer guidelines and vice versa. Like we prepared guidelines for this library, so we shouldn't add the contrary in the template and this kind of stuff. So having the silos may result that our like at the end the exit criteria wouldn't be compatible with each other, which would be a bummer. So
yeah, makes a lot of sense. It makes me think that maybe we shouldn't start with this exit criteria quite already, like for maintainership. We can start with the other three, especially the guidelines on the Python code-based creation, consolidate the libraries, and then we can write the maintainership guidelines. So we start with these three, and this becomes afterwards. Like once we have a
I would even suggest to postpone the guidelines for non-Python developers as well, because I guess the second will kind of influence the first as well.
Yeah. So we can say that the first 2 months, because once we have the first part done, the other part is easier. But at the same time, something that I wanted to suggest on the next one. So let me write down what we wrote first, Eduardo. Maybe postpone I'm gonna put this underneath. Maybe postpone. You don't have access to this? Why are you editing? Suggesting maybe postpone the
everyone is comment only.
really?
I'll type
Share.
thing on the chat.
Oh yeah. So editor. Done. Okay. Maybe postponing the maintainer exit to after the libraries have been defined. So now you should be okay to write defined, and then Tatiana, maybe the first one already. Maybe the learning guidelines as well. And then I'll copy paste this and put underneath here. Because yeah, I agree. So one of the ideas that I was going to suggest is the same way that we have what's going on? Okay, the same way that we have the idea of front-end driven development, where you first develop what we want to see and then you develop the backend for that. We could start with documentation-driven development. So first we write the documentation that we want to have, at least a general idea, the skeleton of the things, and then we see the gap that's in there, and then we start implementing or working on what this gives a better focus on what it's missing of the experience that we want to provide to our colleagues, right? So, for example, okay, what are the libraries that need to be used? We don't have that, so we can't work on this.
I would like what you're saying sounds to me that's quite the opposite. So we should start with the guidelines for the developers and then select the libraries. I would say this is the front end. Like this is the front end I want to offer. We want to offer like the smooth transition from somebody who is coming from Ruby into the Python, and they care less about like which library is in the end like behind the scenes. They care like, okay, how do I write my feature? And I'm not saying that there's particular good or bad way order. Like I see benefits like we start from the libraries because maybe it's more like concrete and it's easier to discuss on like the very at hand matters, like this library is better because this arguments and or that library. Or we want like we want this experience. One thing that I wanted to share is that we probably should be very aware that most of our like contributors to the Python repositories would be transitioning or like part-time joining from the Ruby. So it may be that this would be a very important argument that, okay, this library is suboptimal or the style is suboptimal, but it's more Ruby friendly. So it will ease up the transition or would reduce the risk that somebody will try to work around it just because they feel like, okay, this is how I should write the code. So it may not be the most Pythonic way, but it would be easier way for like the wider pool of the contributors to easily ramp up and to be somewhat successful. I don't have very specific like the examples in mind. It's more like trying to build the awareness that if it will be too like idealistic, we may not get there never because the people that we will offering this are like asking to achieve this ideal would not be that much invested or interested in achieving this ideal. So it's matter of like, do I want this pathway to go across the loan or around it? And if you go around it, the people will still make a shortcut and you will end up with two pathways. So trying to find this right balance.
Facilitating onboarding for Ruby developers, which will lead to not the most Pythonic code base. I have an example of this already, which is the test library. So we use like of course in Ruby we use RSpec, which is BDD, and on Python the current setup is a PyTest that is more like, okay, you have a test and there's not the concept of like there's the concept of fixtures that help and the parameterized, but it's very different than the idea of behavior driven. There are some libraries which are not the most Pythonic way of doing this, like they're not as common as other things, but why did I click this? I don't want to send an email. Example, but we can approach this as move, for example, tests with BDD are not common in Python, but they are natural for Ruby developers. So if they want to write tests, it's better if we have the tests in BDD rather than at least in the.
I know this example about tests really well because this is what I was struggling with that. But to be honest, I'm a bit concerned at what happened after the boards because the amount of the developers who would need to onboard and transition from Ruby to Python will be not kind of indefinite. So at some point of time, we will have people onboarded and working, and we'll have the suboptimal processes. And then we will be having the question, what should we do next? And the new, and for example, in the future, we start hiring Python developers who will come and say, what's that? This is And they will have the opposite problem that we need to optimize our processes once again for the people who are more familiar with Python. And I would say that my issue was like in this test particular was that it was not really clear. Like it was really hard to understand the philosophy, what have to write tests here. Maybe like I'm used to BDD, I used to RSpec, but if I would have the document which explain this is the philosophy of the test in Python, this is what you do keep in mind when you are writing tests in Python. Yeah, I wouldn't need Python or spec version for that.
Yeah, but at some point, like for example, Ruby, we have GitLab Ruby, which is different than general Ruby. Like somebody that knows Ruby will still have a lot to ramp up when they join GitLab, even if they know Rails, even if they know Ruby, right? So there's always like that adapting to the company culture. Every company is unique, and our uniqueness is that Ruby is the default language, and if we want more people to contribute, like other people will jump in and they will learn. It's part of the process, but I agree. It's a balance to be stricken, and it's gonna be a point like the balance. Nobody likes the balance point. Everybody complains about the balance point, and it's part of it. Like it's just managing like minimizing the complaints of both sides on that case. But yeah, so okay, so on this one.
Also, there could be arguments, sorry for interrupting, but there could be also argument for like making the Python more close to Ruby, or like building this shared platform even for the opposite direction. So if the developers join as the Python developers, they're most likely would be exposed at some point to our Ruby code base.
Yeah.
And having this similar ideas, at least the ideas like the BDD, this is a great example. This will help them, okay, I learned this for the Python, which I'm more comfortable because I know the technology, and now I'm coming to Ruby and I understand the idea, but I need to learn the different syntaxes or like the keywords. But it's not two strange, two new things to me. It's just one new things to me. So like, it kind of can build the bridges both ways from Ruby to Python, but then from Python to Ruby as well. And it seems that none of these technologies would go away anytime soon. So it may like be kind of double benefit.
Yeah, it's a very good comment. Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, I think in GitLab, if you don't work with Ruby, your reach of impact is diminished. And ideally, for Python, we can hire primary Python developers and then, onboard potential to the larger code base. It's really hard, especially if we're working on AI Gateway, to just work on AI Gateway, for example, or on the workflow service, to just work on the workflow service. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I also can provide the examples from again secure stage when people were like a lot of people were exposed only to Go working on our Go projects, and then at some point of time there was a decision to move the code to the Rails. So now all those people were exposed to the Rails code base, and it was like very painful transition. So yeah, making the code base closer to each other would be actually good decisions in this case.
Transition was difficult. This would make it easier. Jesus Christ. Okay, cool. So on this documentation-driven development, I guess this will be part of the DRI to decide how to approach each of the topics. Like, for example, identifying the problems with migrating of onboarding on the new language. You can start by writing this. You can start by running a survey with the existing people that had to move to a Python code base, for example. There are many ways to approach, and this, I think, it's how each one should approach. Each one of these are very different topics. So the last one is, I think, the second and the fourth are they require the most technical changes, like really changes to the code base. Especially the fourth. The fourth does a lot of what needs over there doesn't exist yet, so there's no way of deploying, for example, the services on Omnibus. And part of the work might not be done now, but the guidelines should explain how, when, and why, at least. This is not done as of now. So, cool. Let's think about this. I don't think we need to make all of the decisions. We have the DRIs. So I would ask the DRIs now to create the specific epics and start thinking already how to start approaching their problems. Like what's the number of people that they request. It's important not to overload each of us so that we drop throughout. Like we need this requires work, right? And this work that we're doing here competes with the work that we need to do for our teams. And I already spoke with most of them engineering managers. I already warned them, and they should have this accounted for on the milestones that come already. But do make sure that you talk with your manager about this so that it doesn't become a conflict. This is supposed to be something that is added value to every one of us, not something that will cause problems down the road. Yeah. So any other thoughts, any other ideas? Okay. So sync cadence, I see that the decision is to have a single one. Should we do it bi-weekly or should we do it monthly? If we do monthly, we're gonna have 3 meetings, right? Until the end of
Let's do bi-weekly, and then we can also adjust all the time.
Is this time okay? Time, especially for you, Tan? Is this time okay? Okay. So I'm gonna
Yeah, it works
this
for
is gonna
me.
be
Yeah, I'll be away in 2 weeks of December, but this time worked for me. Yes.
yeah, everybody's gonna be away 2 weeks in December. It's December. Like I'm even thinking not counting December as part of this project because everybody's away in December. Like I'm gonna be away in December as well for a bit of time.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I'll take this drag across the board. That's me. Okay. So awesome. I just realized we didn't do introductions, and I know most of us have worked with each other at some point, but we have a little bit of time, so I think that would be nice, at least to understand which problem each one is currently working on across in GitLab. So I can start. So, well, I'm Eduardo. I'm on the custom models team. So we do a lot of work on AI gateway and evaluation, especially when building for self-hosted, so deploying the models on self-hosted. The pain points that I have is maintainership. There are few maintainers and deployment. So we have a lot of problems with deploying for self-hosted, and this is one of the goals that we want to achieve. Who's next? Nikolai.
Okay, yeah, I can step. So, hey, I'm Mikołaj. I'm staff backend engineer at the code creation, but I'm on a borrow to the dual workflows since April this year. And our main changes right now, I would say we are mostly focused on the developer guidelines. So we are very early in the product development. So a lot of like the frameworks and the internal repository architecture decisions that need to be made are still, like, I would say, in progress or rolling. So having the good good, well-defined practices would definitely be helpful when we will be moving between the different code bases or onboarding new developers. We only have a few permanent members, so definitely the pool gonna grow. So the onboarding time and the common practices would be very helpful.
I'm Tatiana. I'm a backend engineer for the Duo Chat team. And funny things about actually our team that it was set up mostly with the Ruby developers, and then like we had Duo Chat code mostly in Rails code base, and then we decided to move everything to Gateway. So now we have the almost full team of the Ruby developers who needs to ramp up of the AI Gateway and the Python really quickly. So I'm mostly works right now with AI Gateway, also with a self project, but most like as a user mostly. And I have a lot of pain points in difference between Python and Ruby right now.
Can go next for this. I'm Mohammed. I'm from custom models team, and I'm backend engineer. I do share the same points that you just mentioned, Tatiana, which is related to the whole team was our Ruby developers. We joined and we started building everything in the Rails app, and then we moved everything to the AI Gateway. And there is a gap between fixing something in the AI Gateway and just waiting someone else to contribute their opinion or get some MR merged. So I feel there's like huge need for us to move forward to be able to add the changes to the GitLab app and then add it to the gateway. And being maintainers and reviewers would be a very addition to the team. So yeah, this is what we are trying to work on.
My name's Tan. I work in the AI model validation team. I help to a lot of evaluation for different features at GitLab. Particular, my focus right now is to consolidate LE5 and the from library together, so we can have a standardized way to evaluate features in GitLab. Also maintain AI gateway as well. Cool.
Awesome. So yeah, thanks for joining today's the first sync. We're gonna have another sync, another kickoff in the later in the day or tomorrow for 10. But for folks that are more on the other time zone. So yeah, we're still gonna have. So tomorrow I'm gonna share the outcomes of today's. And one thing that I really want to remind is that it's really easy to feel like we're being productive on this without actually being productive. So we really need to focus on delivering on each of these criteria. We need to get, it's really easy to spend a lot of time on discussions and not on actually merging this discussion. So I would suggest not having big MRs that are being merged, but very small MRs, and let discussions be follow-ups, like build upon, otherwise we'd never merge. It's like blueprints. If you allow blueprints, they never get merged. At some point you have to cut off and say, okay, now we're gonna iterate next on the next part of it. So it's gonna be the same here. Everybody's gonna have opinions. And we need to decide at some point, quickly, preferably. We can always change. Like right now, we can make a decision and then see it's not okay. We can update later. Same with Ruby. We're updating our guidelines all the time. We don't need to make it the most right thing right now. We can update as we test those guidelines in the first place. But having them is already very useful. Cool. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day or the rest of your night. We'll see you around. Have a good one.
Hey.
Bye-bye.